Michael, thank you so much for being patient. You still there?
Oh, my pleasure. How are you guys doing?
Doing well.
Good.
What do you want to talk about?
Okay, well, I have an argument for the existence of what we could possibly define as God, and that might be problematic later on. But let me just run the argument for you real quick.
Sure.
We can go back to any of the premises if you want to dispute them.
Sure. If you shoot through it quick,
no problem. Go ahead.
Oh, I said if you shoot through it quick, no problem.
Yeah, okay. Premise 1, all facts must have explanations. Premise 2, the fact that there is a cosmos or a universe at all, and that this cosmos or universe with just these laws of physics and laws of nature that exist has an explanation. From premise 1. Premise 3, there must in principle be a theory of everything that explains why just this cosmos with these laws of nature exists, even if we haven't been able to discover it yet. Premise 4, if the theory of everything explains everything, it explains why it is a theory of everything. Premise 5, the only way that the theory of everything could explain why it is a theory of everything is if it itself is necessarily true in all possible worlds.
Mm-hmm.
Premise 6, the theory of everything is necessarily true. From 4 and 5, premise 7, the universe or cosmos understood in terms of the theory of everything exists necessarily and explains itself. From premise 6. And
That's a lot of premises, man.
Premise number 8. Yeah, sorry. And premise 8, that which exists necessarily and explains itself is a definition of God.
Okay.
Yeah, I would.
So you actually traversed. I got to say, man, we went through 3 different arguments.
Yeah, I'll go. It is logically sound, but I'll help out the discussion a little bit.
No, hold on. We don't need it. I promise we can pick it apart by ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay. J. Mike, do you want first crack or do you want me to? Because I am happy to.
Sure. I think me and you might actually have some disagreement on like the necessary. So like, I take a position that there is a necessary being. Like I do hold to contingency arguments. I do hold to that. But I don't think that's a God, right? So if I walked all the way through your premises and granted them, you didn't substantiate what to me is the one premise or subset of premises that makes me an atheist and turns me into a theist. And that is explaining why there's intentionality in an actual conscious mind, right? I don't see any disembodied minds. I only see minds as a emergent property of matter. Now you can dispute that, and, obviously, right? But I don't see how you can say that the premises are sound, even if we conclude that it's valid and it follows. I don't see how you could say it's sound to get to the conclusion that it's God, or even towards the end there, because it seems that you miss a lot of these properties that would be necessary for you to substantiate.
Yeah, well, that's why I wasn't defining God in any specifics except for that last premise. There's only really one substantive or substantial premise, and that's number 1, that all facts have explanations, which you seem to agree with. So that's good. And I guess.
Well, no. I actually don't know if I would agree, because as a foundationalist at that root cause, right, the necessary thing, if we call that R, I'm not going to use Q to try to justify R. It's a brute fact. It's justified. It need not actually an explanation. So I might not even agree with your first premise, depending on how we're looking at that premise.
Right, I understand.
From a foundational standpoint. Right.
Yeah. So so you're talking to 2 people at once, and we all have different opinions, and so it's going to be a little bit messy. So Michael,
I knew we had different opinions on this, Eric.
Yeah. Well, so I don't think a reductio ad absurdum is necessarily a good place to start or stop. So, okay, let's say there's an explanation for everything. What's the explanation for that? It just goes back.
Well, the theory of everything is the explanation for that. I mean, we could get into whether or not the PSR is valid, and
okay. Yeah, so let's get on, because I think the part that I'm a little bit more excited about is the necessary part. J Mike, I'm sure you knew that I was going to go there because I've just been so excited thinking about modal
Yeah,
ontology.
sure. Yeah.
So you said that
Well, can we,
if there's an explanation for everything, that explanation is
right?
necessarily true everywhere, right?
Right. We'll call it the theory of everything.
Okay,
If
so
you
I'm going
want.
to use language that is very, very particular in modal ontology so that we can determine whether or not that's true, right? So
Right.
let's take a look at. Let me ask you a question. Is there a possible world, right? And when I say possible world, I'm not saying that we are in the multiverse or anything like that, but just to simply help us conceive of a thing. Is there a possible world where pigs fly?
There is a possible world. Sure, you could conceive that. I mean, if we're going to use modal logic, yeah, I would agree with that.
Perfect. So would
I
you?
mean, they may not be pigs as we conceive them on Earth, or the laws of gravity may be different. I mean, we could,
Well, and
this argument really isn't based
actually,
on,
Michael,
it's not,
hold on.
it's not based on modal
just
logic. Go ahead.
Michael, you just touched on it, and I don't want to
Mhm.
get too far, because if we get too far outside, we lose everybody listening. So I want to walk
Sure.
through this, okay? So we
Yeah.
can conceive of a possible world where pigs fly. I imagine that in that possible world, the laws of nature are different, right?
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's not impossible. You can imagine maybe the laws of nature being different in that world. So when
Right.
you're plotting this out, it goes W0, R, W1. That R is accessibility. So can we access that universe? We cannot access that universe, because that, when we're specifically talking about the laws of nature in the pigs flying argument, then
Okay.
that is entirely different. So when you talk about a theory of everything, that theory of everything could be true here, but it won't include the theory of everything where the pigs fly, and those two theories are different. And because they're different, it is not necessary. In fact, it is entirely dependent upon, and for me to use the correct terminology, it's possible, but it's not necessary.
Yeah, well, yeah, we could. I mean, if we grab premise one, then the theory of everything does kind of logically entail from that. I'm not using modal logic for this argument. I did say true in all possible worlds, but
yeah, when you say true in all possible worlds, you're
gonna
utilizing modal logic.
Yeah, well, let's just erase that then, because
we're cool. We're kicking premises out. I like that, J Mike. We're actually in the process of building this together. Okay, so
yeah, we're not getting rid of the premise that it's necessarily true. We're going to get rid of in all possible worlds, because we don't want to use modal logic for this argument.
So if that's the case, then just a bit of advice: if it's not necessary to the argument, don't hang ornaments on that tree. Just provide it as cleanly as possible. If you can shave things off, then you need to work on that argument a little longer. Do you think
if we accept premise number one, we can apply it in all possible worlds, but let's not get caught up on that little point.
No,
it's not a modal argument.
Okay, so then quit saying all possible. No, it's okay. Then quit saying all possible worlds. You're using a very specific language. Yeah. No, and then you're saying, well, if we accept premise one, then it would entail. No, it wouldn't. That's what I'm saying. That is not true. Premise one does not lead to that all possible worlds.
The cosmos and multiverse.
I don't believe in the multiverse, we're just using semantics so that we can get through talking about this as a subject.
Okay, so we erased all possible worlds, so let's take that out of the equation.
Okay, so
let's get back to, if we accept premise number one, do you then accept that there is a theory of everything that would explain why this cosmos exists? If we haven't discovered it yet?
So two things. Number one, I'm not convinced that there's a theory of everything. Things might be different, things might change, or things might have absolutely no reason at all. I don't know. And so for me to do that, I think that I would be jumping past my comfortability point, because I think I'd be talking out of my butt. So I don't want to do that. And then on
Sure.
top of that, on top of that, Michael, I was so excited to talk to you, I completely lost the second part. So, J. Mike, is there anything you wanted to add?
Okay. Well, yeah.
Well, I'll let Rick or Michael
the-
finish real fast.
I'll kind of like summarize it. You can reject premise one, which it sounds like, Eric, you were doing, where J-Mac, I think, didn't necessarily reject that. All facts must have explanation.
Well, I did actually retract and say that could be the case, especially from a foundational standpoint. If you're going to say that the brute fact explaining itself isn't really that, right? It's just that foundational thing that can't appeal to something else to explain it, because it just necessarily is that way. Now that would depend on how you look at that. But if he rejects premise one, then nothing else is going to follow.
Yeah, but exactly. I mean,
that was my point. So, I mean, let's just say that everything does have an explanation.
Sure, why not?
We can. I mean, and so then we'll jump down. We'll forget all the other premises, because they do logically follow. And then I think we might disagree on premise number 8, which exists necessarily and explains itself as God. I think that might be the other one that you might differ with.
No worries. So you just summed up the cosmological argument for the existence of God.
No, actually not.
No?
No.
I'm pretty sure that's the cosmological argument. I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure it's cosmological. Anyway,
No,
I don't think Eric's not meaning the cosmological argument, right? There's many cosmological arguments, right?
It's a formation. It falls into that category. Thank you.
He's saying it's in the category of cosmological arguments. Same way it'd be in the category of modal ontological arguments, which I guess in some ways it is if we're going into those kind of modal semantics.
But apparently we're tossing out modal, which is fine. Even though I love it, I'll just cry myself to sleep. That's fine, Michael. So
I thought this one would be fun.
Yeah, people watching might be wondering, why are they talking to Michael about this? What is the point? And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'd love to get to the point, because I think what you're trying to say is, if there's a explanation for everything, you call that explanation God. Is that right?
Right. The necessary being and the thing that explains all of reality, I would label as God. And, the big reveal here is really, I've just argued for the God of Spinoza here, which you probably might accept on some level.
Well, no, I'm not even I'm going to say that, like, when we say the word necessary being, I'm not referring, and I think you would know this too, I'm not referring to an actual agent or thing necessarily, but my thing is that I do walk down that path of these contingency arguments where you get to this necessary thing. And let's say we get there, and I just don't see how you've justified or substantiated that it must be a mind, that it must have intent, right? That doesn't follow, because it seems that you're just saying, well, I call this same thing God. Well, we might be in agreement, but you have a lot of baggage when you call it God, because that's not what we mean. I mean, words are generally used ad populum, right? Like the more amount of people that take this word, they're going to accept that, right? That's just kind of how definitions and usages work. No one's really using God in that way, especially naturalists like myself, like Oppie, right? Graham Oppie wouldn't agree with you and say that's God. He would disagree, but he might grant up until that point. I just think you're missing out premises that would actually substantiate the mind part, right? The God part, the part that the atheist cares about. I mean, I would just say you're one premise away from potentially making me a theist, right? It's a big premise or subset of premises, but that can't get left out of your argument. Otherwise, you're just saying there's potentially this necessary thing at the end of it all, right?
Non-contingent. I just want to be super clear.
I agree with you.
Non-contingent.
I've listened to a lot of Graham Oppie, and I'm just not satisfied with his brute necessitarianism.
Okay.
Brute necessity as being the explanation. And I know that you can, substitute that in as a prime mover.
Sure.
But
so
I don't know, just for me,
it's the principle of parsimony. You're just adding more entities than you actually need, right? Like you compare the theories, you have an extra thing that we don't have substantiated.
You guys, I want people to watch the show to
Well, no,
learn the
but I
topics.
think-
I'm happy we're engaging with the topics, but we need to break them down a little bit more so people can follow with us. Just
Sure.
a skosh.
So basically, what we've come down to is we have, brute facts, which are necessary. Call it energy or the laws of physics, which somehow came into being or existed eternally or came into being at some point, or something that is beyond just a non-teleological entity. And this is going to get esoteric and it doesn't prove anything, but
I think that's what Eric doesn't want, though.
If we're getting super esoteric and not proving anything, let's find a venue where we can talk about it together. I suggest our Discord. Our Discord is fantastic for that. Because while it's something that I would love to talk about, that's my jams, I do want people to be able to walk away from these conversations, being able to engage in them themselves and feel comfortable doing so. And so we've got to take baby steps to get there. But I appreciate you calling. And
Right.
I think
what we concluded from all of this is that either we can just take brute facts coming into existence on their own for whatever reason, and then somehow forming into laws of physics, or we can posit, something more, and maybe we want to call that God rather than just, the laws of physics or whatever.
I mean, you could do that, but then you get into the semantics, and to break down what I'm saying a lot easier is just to say, we both have these theories, right? I walk the line with you for naturalism. You walk the line. You add an extra entity. That's the problem. Like when we compare the two, you have something extra inside your theory versus mine that you haven't substantiated. Mine is simpler. It's called the principle of parsimony. So it's just that theory wins. It's not to like it better explains it because you're just post hoc rationalizing what could explain that, or you're saying the same thing that we both agree with. You're just calling it God. That just has baggage then at that point, right? So what I'm trying to say, I'm not trying to confuse the audience or anything, but you have to actually, within your premises, right? You have to actually substantiate the mind and all that part, because otherwise we're not talking about an argument for God. We're just potentially talking about an argument a naturalist might be able to use, right?
Exactly. We're just saying that the cosmos is God. That's why it's the God of Spinoza. I mean,
Michael,
we could.
Michael.
I don't want to keep you guys too long.
Yeah, Michael, as the host in keeping an eye on pacing, I'm sorry to do this to you. You sound like a ton of fun. I hope you call back. Let's pick one small thing at a time next time so that we can walk through them together, because I think that everybody stands to benefit from it.